وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح يا فتاح يا فتاح. So going back to last week's discussion we were having, do I have a volunteer? Someone can summarize. What did we discuss last week? Anyone? You weren't here? What did we discuss last week?
Brief summary. It was about the Turks, how they were.
Can we close that door, please? With inshallah. Sorry, Can someone close that door, please? Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
How we got to the Turks and how they were not doing anything. They were kind of just laid back, and how other scholars were kind of laid back as well. Just laziness after laziness.
Can you say louder so everyone can hear it? It's not for me, by the way. It's for the audience. Those who were absent and stuff.
You can recap that.
No, I mean, this is, otherwise, there's no faida. I'm going to ask someone, what did we learn from last week? Otherwise, this is becoming, this is not for me. It's for the whole community, right? So, go on, continue.
So same thing what I said, and then also we talked about how Muslims are a little behind, about 200 or 300.
What kept the Muslims behind? What happened?
The printing. They weren't printing enough. They didn't believe in printing books. They instead to like just writing books by their hands, so that kind of set them back 200 years.
400 years.
400.
Muslims fell behind. Muslims are still behind. Muslims fell behind 400 years, right? Good, well done. That's a good start. So last week we spoke about the printing press and what, kept the Muslims behind. The fall of the Muslims, right? And that's the reality. And many Muslims are still doing the same mistakes of their forefathers. Their fathers made the same mistakes. Their grandfathers made the same mistakes. They're making the same mistakes. And if they're not teaching their sons and daughters, they will make the same mistakes as well. And what is this mistake? The mistake of not printing books at that time and not reading enough books. Limited knowledge. The Western world, the Western Empire, they flourished because of their because they were printing books and they were reading many topics on science, on philosophy, on politics, and so on and so forth. Muslims, they started printing in 1820s onwards, but mostly it was on religious things. It's very important, by the way, right? And even today you will find we don't have many Muslims in the universities. In Oxford University, Cambridge University in the UK, not many Muslims. Where are the Muslims? What are they doing? And then when we have problems in the community, we need people those who have knowledge, those who have expertise in lobbying, right? Like there's a rise of fascism in Europe right now. I don't know how many of you are watching news, right? There's a rise of fascism, anti-Muslim sentiments throughout Europe. It's becoming global. It's going to come here, whether you like it or not. It's in parts of America, Texas and other places, right? People are voting against mosques. We don't want a mosque here. We don't want to hear this adhan. We don't want to see these guys, foreign-looking guys, dressed in a foreign clothing, speaking in a foreign language. This is stuff like that. It's happening, but it's becoming more common in Europe, in England, in France. So it's difficult for sisters to wear hijab and walk around, right? Just like in India, in some parts of India, if you go, Muslims are getting lynched. That's the reality. So this is something we need to be aware of. So we talked about if you remember, also talked about at the gate of Vienna in 1683, there was a war and Muslims lost that war. And that was a realization in the mind and the psyche of the Europeans, Western Europeans, that, we can defeat the Muslims. If we can defeat them militarily, we can also defeat them intellectually. Right? That was 1683. And then in 1744, if I'm not mistaken, there was another war. That was it. That was ice on the cake. That was it. Then Europeans officially, they realized, this is it. And the Europeans, they started using the printing machine in the 15th century when Muslims lost Andalusia. What is Andalusia? Can someone tell me? What is Andalusia? Spain. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, exactly. It was part of Europe, Spain, Portugal today, parts of Italy, Sicily was under Muslims, right? And Muslim army, they even went to, on the border of France, the northern France, if I'm not mistaken, or southern, right? But what went wrong? What went wrong, right? So there is a long history. There was the Chinese, they're the ones also, by the way, they started using papers. The Muslims, they started using papers, writing on papers, if I'm not mistaken, in the 8th or 9th century onwards. Printing press officially came about in the 13th century. But in the 15th century, the Europeans started using it. Now the question is, let me see how many of you can answer. I want to see how much, awareness you have. Try your best, inshallah, it's okay. Why do you think the Muslims did not use a printing press? Was this political or it was religious? It was religious, okay. What's your explanation? Why?
Because they didn't want any mistakes to happen, especially
Okay.
later on, and then that gets moved on to the next generation as well.
Okay, anyone else?
They don't want to change what Sahaba did. Sahaba used to write it, and now it's like an innovation, which might create a controversy. And there was ikhtilaf between many people.
Yes, so one answer was it was religious, because if people start using the Quran to print, then there will be some mistakes and so forth. And then another opinion is that, what is it? You mentioned Sahabas didn't do it. They didn't use machine. Why should we use a machine? Okay, anything else?
It was also people losing their own jobs too. Because back then they would write and
Mm.
pay for writing a book.
Yeah. So, I was reading an article by a Turkish professor. So he said something very interesting. I haven't read the full article, it's about 50 pages. I'm still reading. He mentioned something interesting. He said that religious ulama, the imams and the muftis in the Ottoman Empire, they didn't issue it from a religious perspective. It was more so issued by the politicians. It was political. Why is that? His argument is that knowledge is power, and the ruling class, they're in power. The ruling people are ruling, they were ignorant. They can keep them subjugated. They can stay as slaves. Whatever the ruling class say, you just listen and obey, right? And so if you start printing books, then what's going to happen? People are going to be educated and knowledgeable, and they will attack the government. Imagine this, like for example, I don't know, give me a country. Name me a country, I don't know, a poor country. Let's say, I don't know, Sudan. Imagine people in Sudan, you have 100% literacy rate. They know how to read, write, speak. If they know how to read, write, and speak, they know how to think. They will be able to verbally debate and attack the government, the ruling class. They don't want to deal with that. So keep the people dumb and ignorant. Don't give them access to books, right? So the more, if we start using the printing press, people are going to start reading various books on science, on politics, on how politics should be, and they will get ideas, shut it down. So that's one opinion. That's what he mentions. Another opinion, which also makes sense, and by the way, both of you are right. So these are also opinions. But another opinion, they say that if you start adding to everything you said, if you start reading books on your own, and if you have books available in the libraries and bookstores, then you are removing the teachers. And in Islam, having a murabbi, a teacher who's doing a tarbiyah while he's teaching is very, very important. Your tazkiyah and tasawwuf, spirituality and everything. Because if you remove the teachers, the murabbis, okay, I have all these books. I'm going to read all the tafsir and hadith all on my own. I don't need teachers. I don't need imams. I don't need sheikhs. I am the sheikh. So this is what scholars also have said, which is happening right now, by the way. Many people, they don't want to go to the mosque. Why? Why do I need to go to the mosque? Why do I need to go and pray Jummah? I can watch it from YouTube live. Why do I need to read Quran with the sheikh? I will learn online on Zoom.
Does
Yeah, so this is a big fitna. So, yeah, so some people will say, no, I don't need to go to the mosque. I will just listen and learn. But this attitude is very contradictory to the Quran. How so? What's the first verse in the Quran Allah mentions? When the Quran was revealed. Iqra. What does Iqra mean? Read. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, He would have told us, listen to YouTube. Go watch, some waz mahfil. But Allah is saying read. So when you're doing the reading, for example, right? And this is something Muslims stopped doing. Otherwise, Muslim societies were a very educated society. We know from, Hindustan, Delhi Sultanate, for example, we had the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire, we had Andalusia, the Khilafah in East Africa, West Africa, throughout the Muslim lands. Muslims were very educated. In Islam, also in the dunya. But we've lost that. Now, if you do like a quick Google search, what percentage of the Muslim community actually read books? You will find it's like, I don't know, probably less than 5% or something. I don't know. Very, very few. Even those 5%, they will read probably 1 or 2 books a year. But compared to the Jewish community and Christian community, they're reading like 10 books, 20 books a month. Right? Sitting together as a family. Fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, uncles, aunties, everyone sitting together. They're not reading Torah. Of course, they do their own Torah and the Bible reading, but they're also reading other books. On religion or non-religion, doesn't matter. Just reading for the sake of reading. And when you read, you're thinking. When you're thinking together, you have a positive, feelings. So if you do that together, you have positive feelings towards one another. And if you're not reading, if you're not thinking, then you assume the other person is thinking exactly like you. Right? So this is basically this is what happened, unfortunately. And so I want to start with this chapter, inshallah, and then we can continue next week. So yeah, it is right. Sorry, it's not 1744, it's 1774. He mentions it in this book. The Ottoman Empire, they suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the Europeans. The shock of this defeat helped somewhat to open the eyes of the Turks to the ugly realities of their situation. Because they thought they were strong. But after that defeat, they realized, oh my God, we're far from that. Then they had to reorganize their military. I'm sure I don't know if you're watching the news, what's happening now? We have Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and Turkey. They're doing something. Okay, fine, but what is their blueprint? What is their strategy? What is their long-term vision? Who is it for? Is this for a secular purpose or for a nationalistic purpose? Or this is for this? Or are they going to represent the whole ummah? Right? So that's the thing. So the ugly situation, the Ottoman Empire, they realized we are undefeatable. They just got defeated in 1683. Now in 1744, after this defeat, there was an awakening amongst the Ottomans to the ugly realities of the situation, and some efforts were made to improve things. Number one, they started reorienting and reorganizing their military, starting with changing the military uniform. Wear shirts and pants, wearing a hat, for example. So this is the beginning of modernization. So if you remember in the khutbah, we talked about modernity, right? The definition of modernity. I've already done that. So you should know it by now and try to connect everything we're talking about. So everything will make sense. And then he mentions that Sultan Salim III, he opened a new fashion school, including an engineering college. And in these colleges, he himself taught. But guess what? These fashion schools and engineering schools, they were based on European curriculum. So you ran out of ideas, you're copying other people's ideas. The moment you realized you ran out of ideas, finished. This is a decline. Right? This is the decline. And then he mentions a new world order happened in the political reform. Right? So this is basically in 17 what? 80 onwards, when America was founded. America is rising to power. And the Ottoman is declining, the Muslim world. The whole of Muslim world, they're declining. And then he mentions Mahmud II. Sorry, so what happened? The old army, so Sultan Salim III, when he decided to reform the political party, the armies, the rebels, and they assassinated him. What did they do? They assassinated Sultan Salim III. After he was murdered, you had another sultan by the name of Mahmud II, and his successor Abdul Majid the first devoted themselves to nation building. How do we build a nation? Same thing, you can apply the same context in the masjid. How do we build our masjid? If it's broken, there is no vision, there is no mission, what do we do? What do we start from? We need to go on that drawing map, start drawing, planning, right? And then he mentions that after this happened, it was nothing compared to the mighty rise of Europeans. And then the fate that befell the Muslims in Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, India, Turkestan, and elsewhere in the 18th and 19th century, and then the rest happened basically, right? And also, and then he finishes this chapter, and then inshallah I'm going to talk about the first few paragraphs on the next chapter. But very quickly, he doesn't mention it in this book. So what happened was, in 1780s, the British Empire, you're aware of the Battle of Plassey, right? Shiraz ad-Dawla, yes? So the British, when they first landed in the subcontinent, they landed in West Bengal. And historically, at that time, that part of Bengal was very wealthy. And the whole of Hindustan together, they had the wealth of 25% of the entire globe. Okay? And remember, British, they're reading now, engineering. It's not just British, the whole of Europeans, and they started building those ships, warships. They had soldiers, and then they were able to sail all the way to India. And the Muslims, they didn't know how to build ships. You need knowledge for that, right? Even now, for example, we have nuclear power, we have physicists, right? But you need knowledge how to make your ideas and thoughts. If you don't have knowledge, then those who have the knowledge, they're going to keep making things, and they will have what thing on you, right? So it was easy for the British Empire and also the French Empire, we also talked about Napoleon. He landed in Egypt, but then he was defeated. But 30 years later, the French army, they went somewhere. Where did they go? Anyone? Napoleon landed in Egypt in 1798. He was there for 3 years, and then he was defeated, and then he left Egypt. He tried to get into Syria, he also lost. It was Algeria. So Algeria was in 1830, they were under the French occupation until when did they get their independence? In 1966, I think, right? So imagine what happened. And the French, they did not show any mercy to the Muslims in Algeria. If you don't know the history, it's tough. It should hurt you. You should go and read this, what they did. They have skeleton of Muslims in Paris right now as a trophy. This is what we did to these barbarians. So they fought the Muslims, right? And those Muslims who resisted, they were defending their women, their children, their wives, their daughters, but then they were crushed. And what happened? All the heads of these soldiers, Muslim soldiers, or those locals, they're in a museum in Paris. Search it up, you'll find it on Google, right? Yes, it's known. These are known things. Again, going back to Muslims don't read. That's why they don't know, right? So 1830, this is when French, they entered Algeria. And then since then, they started demolishing masajid, and then they started demolishing madaris. Basically, removing their Islam and Muslim identity. Okay? And that's it. One generation, second generation, the Muslims, they started, they wanted to become more French. Right? So that's, and you can read on this more inshallah, and I can't get into more details. So the next chapter is the rise of the West and its consequences. So this is how the Western world, they came into power. But we can't always blame on colonization. We have to always look into our own situations. Where were we as empires and as societies? So he mentions over here that with the decline of the Ottomans or the Turks, international leadership passed from the Muslims to the non-Muslim nations of the West. Otherwise, internationally, the leadership, political leadership was under the Muslims. Nowadays, who has the political leadership? Well, who had the political leadership last, let's say, 50 years or 100 years? British. The British Empire and American. After World War II, it's mainly the Americans. They're deciding everything. Right? We're going to get to that. We're going to talk about other things. We're going to talk about Lawrence of Arabia and these things. So he mentions over here, the political leadership got transferred from the Muslims to the non-Muslim nations. And they have been preparing for this for a long time. Now, there is no rival. There is no competition. So for example, in FIFA World Cup, you have Argentina versus Spain. At least there is an opponent. But after the defeat of the Muslims, the West came into power. Well, they don't have any opponent. Because the Muslims, they will never be able to rise up because they're 400 years behind. Are you following? Yes? And then of course they started colonizing, they started conquering lands with armies, they started going to India, Middle East and Arab countries. The first target was the education system. So in India, in Punjab, if I'm not mistaken, there was the British Empire, they appointed an educator. Okay? I don't want to mention his ethnicity, right? But he was appointed in the 1880s. And he started opening up these colleges, small colleges, in front of these Muslim cities and Muslim towns. Right? And the Muslims at that time, or before the British, they were learning Arabic, they were learning Farsi, they were learning Turkish. Urdu became a language only 200 years ago. It's a very new language, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, right? But Muslims were very learned. Muslim kids, they would memorize the Quran by the age of 5. They're learning politics, they're learning economics, maths, everything, right? But when the British came in, they started opening these colleges, and all the zamindars. Who are the zamindars? The landowners. Yes? The landowners, they were wealthy. They said, you know what? And also they were influenced by looking at, European new fashion, new dress, more freedom. So they started sending their sons and daughters to these modern colleges. And their sons and daughters, they were getting exposed to European literature, European books. Yes? And then what happened? So they stopped reading Persian literature in Farsi or in Arabic. And European literature is all about what? Romance, freedom. Yes? All the fancy stuff, right? And this kind of gave birth to a new generation, those who moved away from Arabic literature, Persian literature, and Turkish literature towards the European literature. Books written by English, French, German, and Italian and Spanish authors from Europe and Russia too. Now, if these kids and teenagers in 1880s are going to these colleges, when did World War happen? World War I. 1914, right? And how long did it last? 4 years, 3-4 years. And it finished, I think, in 1917, 1918. 17, I think. So who do you think these young boys and girls they sided with in World War I? Yeah, so they stood up against the Ottomans. How so? Why?
Because that idea was put in their head.
The ideas were planted in their head from a young age in these European colleges that we are the, what's the word, the civilized ones. We are the stronger empire. We are the civilized empire. These Ottomans is outdated. They're barbaric. They're behaving like animals. Okay, and we are going to free you. So we need to get rid of the Ottomans and all these religious empires and Muslim empires, and we're going to replace them with nation states. So that was happened, and most of the leaders during World War I from the Muslim countries, right, they were basically trained into these modern colleges, if you want to call it, in the 1880s onwards. And then the rest is history. And then we had World War II. So it's very important, but I'm just giving you a build-up on this, so keep that in mind. So he mentions over here the history of Western civilizations. I'm going to just read this and then we're going to wrap it up, inshallah. The Western civilization is not a recent origin. Its roots go back thousands of years to ancient Greece and Rome. The Western outlook on life and ethics can be traced directly to the ancient Greek and Roman civilization. The Western nations kept cultivating the spirit, the philosophy, the sciences, and the literature, the painting culture. Da Vinci, what's his name? Right, Da Vinci. So again, the art culture, the painting culture. This is, a sign of what? Strength. We can draw, we can paint. What can you do? You're just chanting. And remember, before modernity, Europe was a very dark place. There was you had so many different Christian sects, and they were fighting against one another, and there weren't any Muslims, there weren't any Jews, because Jews were living with the Muslims, right? So this was happening. And then he mentions it is possible to be deceived of the new facade, but the fact remains that its substance was made up of Greek and Roman materials. The Greek civilization was the first clear manifestation of the Western mind. So there you go. If you want to understand the West, you need to understand the Greeks. Right? Western culture is the Greek culture. Okay? It was the first civilization to be built exclusively on Western intellectual and ethical ideals and aspirations. Okay? And then inshallah next week, under this chapter, we're going to talk about the Greek civilization. Who were they and what was their culture and society was made up on, inshallah. And with this, we're going to stop here, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a tawfiq. Yes, go ahead.
So, when Ottomans were defeated, by that time, did the people against Ottomans, did they go through all the literature, Islamic literature, how did they...
What do we mean by, okay, when we say Islamic literature, we're talking about what? Religious things.
How were they able to defeat Muslims?
Intellectually, they were reading. They were reading, and Muslims, and they started translating these books from, Arabic to, because most of the books were translated, especially on the Greek civilization, on logic, on philosophy, on politics. What is politics?
They defeated intellectually, they did read.
Yeah, because Muslims remained in dark, I guess, they kind of remained backward. Because if you're not reading, if you're not expanding your knowledge, then you, as a society, you're behind. Right? The Abbasid, the Umayyad, they were, mighty civilization. They were a very educated society. They knew multiple languages. They weren't just Arabs. I mean, look, Arabic leadership, it ended with the Abbasid. The Seljuk, who were the Seljuk? Who were they? No. Seljuks were, if I'm not mistaken, the Kurds. Salahuddin Ayyubi. Right? He's the one who started Seljuk. Right? But again, Seljuk also ended in 50 years or 60 years after Salahuddin died. Because they didn't produce leadership. You need to keep producing leaders. If you're just saying, Salahuddin, okay. I mean, all right. Do you have a Salahuddin? So Arabs, last time they demonstrated leadership, it was nearly, 1,000 years ago. right? And then it was the Seljuks, and then it was the the Ottomans, the Mamluks. Well, the Mamluks were in Egypt, and the Ottomans, they came after the Mamluks, and then Ottoman, they ran the show for 500 years, and then they became weak and corrupt towards the end, last 200 years. There was a lot of tension, infighting, and the rest is history. And then you had the birth of nation states. So yes, to answer to your question, yes, the Europeans, they were reading not just the Bible, but they were reading on various books. The Muslims weren't doing that. Muslims still not doing that. Muslims are still complaining, just running their mouth, just saying, "Oh, we're the victim mindset." We need to keep reading. We need to produce thinkers. We need to produce intellectuals. Where are they? We need to produce writers. Where are the books written by Muslims in volumes? Right? It doesn't have to be in English. There are Muslims in England or in English-speaking countries. Write books. Share your ideas. There are Muslims in Germany, in France, in Italy. Write books in your the countries you are in. Or if you're in Arab country, write in Arabic, whatever language. But start writing ideas, thoughts. Where are we heading? Ibn Khaldun, he was a scholar. He wrote books on Quran, Hadith, Tafsir, Fiqh. He was a Qadi, but he was also a historian. He was also a philosopher. He was a great thinker. Right? So that's the thing. What happened? We still haven't learned. Right? We're still, it's been how long? 600 years now. Sure, there are Muslims, they're going to universities, they're learning how to read, write, they're writing books. I guess, I don't know, maybe we can start with children's books, then slowly for the teenagers, then for the young adults, then for the adults. Then the more you write books, the more you write ideas. Like in the khutbah, for example, we talked about how modernity came about. Those individuals, people like René Descartes, Galileo, for example, right? You had Copernicus, you had Berkeley, David Hume, right? Isaac Newton, and who else? Immanuel Kant. All these individuals, they came with their ideas. They put their ideas in book format, and those books were taught where? In the education, in the universities. And then they became policies. Then the government applied them. Boom. Muslims are not doing that. We're just discussing our ideas in tea shops over a cup of tea and coffee. Okay? And they remain ideas. Put it down. Write it down. Let's see. Write it down and get it reviewed by your peers and academically analyzed and critiqued. Otherwise, yeah. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Two things to follow up on that one is nowadays most of the governments, they control what books gets to be in school. They don't just let any books to be in there. That's known. That's in every Muslim, I'll say Muslim countries mostly, Arab countries. Another thing as well, I don't know if it's true or not. Wasn't there a library in Egypt that got burned down that said back 1,000 years?
I'm not sure. Maybe the Baitul Hikmah you're talking about?
There's a library that got burned
You
down.
need to give me the exact name. Give me exact name, when, what, who. Otherwise, I won't be able to comment. Is there anything else?
I'll read more about it and I'll bring it up next Saturday and see if it has anything
Yeah.
relation.
But yeah, we have to keep reading. And I think, I don't know, if you're not reading, you're not going to expand your thinking. Your worldview is very narrow. It's very, rigid. You have to think, you have to learn from other civilizations. Take the good and leave the bad. You have China. Look at China. China, they have, in the 90s and 80s, it was a very different society in China, right? And within 20 years, look where China is, the Chinese civilization. The vast majority of the Chinese people are very educated. They're literate. They know how to read, write, speak well, think. They know how to dress well. Compared to when we move the camera to Pakistan, to Bangladesh, to Afghanistan, to Somalia. Whoa, what is this? What's happening here? Where are the people who are thinking, speaking, representing not their countries, but representing God, Prophet ﷺ, and the religion, and so on and so forth. All right? So inshallah, we make dua, we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us victory when we deserve it. This is going to happen, this is going to come whenever God wills it. We can't forcefully make it happen. But we have to continuously producing knowledge and focus on that, towards our children, our sons and daughters. Not limit them. If we send, again, going back to the question again we talked about the other day, if you're sending them to an institute, like nowadays universities, these universities are again modern universities, your sons and daughters are going to become modern. And what does modern mean? Anyone, if you remember the definition of Michael Gillespie, what was the definition?
Removing God from the center of your.
Thank you. So removing God from the center of your existence. So you can't be a modern and Muslim at the same time. You can't be Marxist and Muslim at the same time. You can't be a progressive, liberal, secularist or feminist or red pill and Muslim at the same time. It's contradictory. All these isms. Even, you can't be a radical and Muslim at the same time. You can't be extremist and Muslim at the same time. Because the word Muslim means what? What does it mean? The one who submitted and surrendered his will to the Lord of the universe. He is in the state of humility, right? He's in the state of, he's serving God and he's serving the people. Right?
So the Shiaism, right? Was this not a political affiliation?
Not, later on it became political, yeah.
Ali Karamallahu Wajhahu, that was his political affiliation.
So yeah, historically it was political, but later on it became like a theological. After 200-300 years. But at the beginning it was political, yes.
And another thing is, hopefully it's not off the topic, but they're saying that the King of England, when he sent a letter to Khalifa Hisham ibn Abdul Rahman in Spain, in Cordoba, right, the University of Cordoba, he asked,
King John, I think. Okay, go on.
is that fake or
So we have to verify these historical issues. Is this really true? Who said it? Can we verify it? Can we trace it back? So there is King John of England, apparently he sought help from one of the Khalifa in Andalusia. I think 14th or 15th century.
so it is true though? It's not.
So, that's the thing, isn't it? So most English historians, they argue,
They're saying it's fake.
yeah, so I'm not sure. I haven't done the verification, so I won't be able to tell you. But yeah, so the English King John, I forgot which number, he did, according to the report, he sought help because he was being persecuted. He was being oppressed. So he sought help from the Muslim king in Andalusia in Spain. Can you please come and help me? And
For his daughter to study medicine and
that too, even his daughter, the English king's daughter, to study in the Muslim university. Because Muslim universities back then, he was like Oxford and Cambridge and Yale and Harvard of today. But right now, Muslims don't have universities. Do they? Where? Are there any universities? Those universities, they're based on copy-paste, but then fake version, it's rebranded. Yes? But there is no original idea happening. Where is the curriculum? Where are the educators? Where are the philosophers of education? That's not happening. So we need to go back on the drawing board and basically plan and so on and so forth. Inshallah, I'm going to stop here. I'll also pause the live stream. جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خيرا.